Welcome to the Academic IELTS Writing Task 1 video. In this video, we are going to discuss how you can write a Task 1 response to a Band 7 or even Band 8 or 9 level. So for Academic IELTS Writing Task 1, you are given some kind of a graph, a bar chart, a pie chart, or even sometimes a diagram as well. And you have to describe that graph or diagram in your writing using at least 150 words. So in this video, we are going to look at this example of a bar chart. So in order to be able to write at least 150 words, you should have a you have to think in a way that you need to observe some patterns in the graph that you can then write about. Maybe 3 or 5 patterns that you can see in that graph. So if we see this graph closely, then we can see that it's about the percentage of United Kingdom workers using different forms of transport in the year of 2000 and 2020. And basically, there are 5 forms of transport: car, bus, train, bicycle, and walking. So, just by looking at it, the first thing that stands out is that the car is probably the most popular or the most common method of commuting or traveling. And another interesting point to note is that the use of car has actually decreased between 2000 and 2020. So these are the 2 points that we can write about. Also, if we see close enough, then we can see that the use of train and the use of bicycle has actually increased in these 20 years, which is also something that we need to write about. If we see walking, it has actually decreased a bit, but not like it's not a very significant change overall. So these are some of the points that we need to write about. Also, now if you think about how we have to structure this response, then maybe in the first paragraph we can write 1 or 2 sentences just describing what this bar chart is all about. So we can write something like maybe the bar chart compares the proportions of workers in the UK who traveled to work by 5 different modes of transport, something like that. And then in the second paragraph, which is the main paragraph, we can write about the overall trends that we observe. So we can write about that car is the most popular way of traveling. We can also write that bus and walking have become slightly less popular, as we can observe in the graph. Their use has actually declined a bit. Okay. And then probably in the third and fourth paragraph, we can just divide it in a way that maybe in the third paragraph we can write about 2000 and what mode of transports were common, and then in paragraph 4 we can write about 2020 in detail. And then in paragraph 5 we can just write a short conclusion using, again, maybe one or two sentences. Okay, so let's look at a sample answer for this bar chart. So here's the sample response that says, in the first paragraph, it's a short one sentence paragraph which says that the bar chart compares the proportions of workers in the UK who traveled to work by 5 different modes of transport in 2000 and 2020. Okay, and then, as I said, in the first body paragraph, we have to write about the overall trends. Okay, maybe I can write it down for you over here as well. Overall trends. And then in the very last paragraph, one or two sentences on the conclusion. Okay, so the first body paragraph says, overall, traveling by car was the most common method in both years, as you saw. That car is the most popular way. By contrast, the proportions of commuters traveling by train and bicycle increased considerably, while bus and walking became slightly less popular. These are all the points that we explained earlier. Now, the next whole paragraph we have just written on the year of 2000. Okay, so in 2000, cars accounted for 55% of journeys to work, making them by far the dominant form of transport, or you can write the most dominant form of transport, or the most common or popular form. It's up to you. Then we have written that buses were the second most widely used option at 20%, while trains and walk each account for 10%, or you can write almost 10% if you're not sure about the percentage. Okay, cycling was considerably less common, with only 5% of workers using bicycle. So in this paragraph we have only described the transport used in 2000. The next paragraph we are focusing on the year of 2020. Okay, so by 2020, the proportion traveling by car had fallen by 7 percentage points to 48%. Bus use also decreased, dropping from 20 to 14%, while the figure for walking fell marginally from 10 to 8%. In contrast, train travel rose from 10 to 18%, representing an increase of 8 percentage points. If you want, instead of writing in contrast, because we have written it in the first main body paragraph as well, you can also write that it is interesting to note. Okay, it's also a really good phrase to use. I can write it down for you ahead. It is interesting to note, and then you can write your point. Okay, all right. The most notable proportional growth was recorded for cycling, which more than doubled from 5% to 12%. Okay, if we have a slight look at the graph again, so you can see it, for the use of bicycle, it has almost doubled, actually more than doubled. Okay, so we have written that as well in the 2020 paragraph. And then, as I said, um, in the last paragraph, you have to write one or two sentences for your conclusion. So we have written overall, the figures indicate a modest shift away from private cars and buses towards trains and bicycles, although cars remained clearly dominant in 2020. You can also write that although cars remained clearly dominant in 2020 as well. Okay, you can add as well if you want to. Otherwise, it's grammatically correct as it is. So basically, the point that I'm trying to make is that when you look at the diagram or the graph or whatever it is, you have to break it down into some simple points that you can talk about, you can write, and then write, like explain each thing in a separate paragraph. Like we explained 2000 in a separate paragraph and 2020 in a separate paragraph as well. So that's the most basic and effective and simple way of writing an academic writing task in a way that you can achieve a band 7 and also band 8 or even band 9. Thank you so much.